United we're as strong as a mountain.
This is Steve Zeltzer with Workweek. And the growing rise of fascism internationally and in the United States is an issue of concern to working people and trade unionists throughout the country. And what it means both for working people in this country and some of the lessons of the rise of fascism during the 30s in Europe. And joining us today is George Window. He's a retired member of UAW Local 12, Toledo, Ohio, the Jeep plant. And he has studied the rise of fascism in Germany and also is concerned about the rise of fascism in the United States. So welcome to our show, George.
Thank you for having me.
I wanted to ask you, I mean, are you concerned that there is a threat of fascism in the United States? Some people say it's authoritarianism and some people say it's fascist. What exactly is going on in the United States? And do you really feel that we face a fascist government and a fascist regime?
Yes, I do. And I feel that exactly. And I felt it for a long time. I personally thought that these developments that we see now, I expected those to happen in the 1990s, based upon the dot-com bubble and all that so forth, and then the recessions. And then 2008, I thought maybe they're going to go with fascism. But my experience in Toledo is that our city officials have basically financed 3 appearances of the neo-Nazi group called the National Socialist Movement in Virginia, Roanoke, Virginia, once led by Bill White. We chased the fascists out of here, the Nazis, 3 times, twice in 2005 and once in 2010. In fact, in 2005, we got press on the BBC saying the workers and citizens of Toledo threw the fascists out, threw the Nazis out of Toledo. But then they said, and there was a riot afterwards, and they said, BBC at least said it's an anti-Nazi riot. But the way they presented in the main press was, it's just a riot. Black people, you know how they are. So I've been fighting fascism probably since 1973 when I was in Greece, and the military government in Greece called out the tanks on the people in the Polytechnic uprising in 1973. I was a young kid. I didn't know much. My friends that I talked to, I had a Palestinian friend who could speak English, and he said, and I told him, I said, he said, Saeed, I hope fascism never comes to my country. And Saeed said, George, wake up. Fascism comes from your country. And I go, really? I didn't. That's how naive I was and unschooled. But since 73, when I've seen tanks run over people and tanks running over the taxi that I and my girlfriend once were in, and we escaped, it was a traffic jam and the tanks crushed our taxi. We weren't killed and neither was our driver, but all our luggage was in that. So my point being is that the general strike that I experienced, I didn't know at the time, also extended from Athens to Thessaloniki. And this meant the workers shut down the government, shut down the cities, and the government responded with tanks. But once you do that, once you respond with tanks, what card can you play after you have the tanks in the streets? What do you got left? You got nothing. And that's what happened in Greece. They tried to crush the Greek people. And 1 year later, in 74, the fascist government fell in Greece. So the power of the general strike is what we have to use in this country. And I don't know if the American people were as militant and as freedom loving as the Greek people. They claim that they invented democracy, so it's no surprise that they fought so hard to defend democracy against a military regime. So general strike, and I think that there was a general strike in the United States in 1934. I think it was in San Francisco, started by
there were several general strikes. The last one was in 1946 in Oakland. San Francisco had one in 34. Minneapolis had 34.
One thing I would like to get across to people is the power of the general strike and the fear that it will engender in the fascist regime and their supporters. Um, Everyone knows who Adolf Hitler was in Nazi Germany, and they know that Germany attacked Poland in 1939 in September of 39. But the threat of the war in Poland was a general knowledge. Everybody realized Hitler was planning to invade Poland before he did it. But the city of Bremen, and if you look it on a map, it's pronounced, I guess in English, it's Bremen, but it's pronounced in German as Bremen. But anyhow, they called a general strike when the Nazi regime indicated that they were interested in attacking Poland, and they were claiming there were incidents on the border and so forth. And the people in Bremen, the workers, it's a strong union town. In 1939, 1 month before Hitler actually invaded Poland, he was planning to invade it in August. But because the Workers' Council in Bremen, Germany, called for a general strike, not just in Bremen, but all over Germany, and the city of Bremen did go on general strike. Hitler sent in a Panzer Grenadier Division. These are tanks and soldiers on foot. They invaded the city of Bremen on August 1st, 1939. So the people in Germany say the first battle of World War II was not fought in Poland. It was fought in Bremen. Hitler had to kill thousands of his own people to make everyone afraid of joining this general strike. And Hitler waited several weeks because he wanted to make sure that no other city was going to go on general strike, and he'd have to repeat what he did in Bremen. So this is something that, Hitler took power in 1933, and it took 6 years for the workers to stand up against it. And why did the workers in Bremen do that? Because a lot of people that worked in the factories were from Eastern Germany, where the people who live there speak both German and Polish. They're bilingual people, and they call themselves Kashubians. And it's just like if we would think of maybe Canadians. Well, some Canadians are bilingual. They speak French and they speak English and so forth. And the American people feel a little bit of compassion or empathy or neighborliness with these people. And these German workers felt that for the Kashubians, who definitely did not want to see Poland get invaded because they had relatives in both Germany and in Poland, and they didn't want the war. So if this general strike had succeeded and spread across Germany, it might have stopped Hitler in his tracks, and there might have been a revolt even in the military at that time. So the idea of a general strike is very important. That's why I and some of my co-workers and comrades are trying to call for a referendum in the UAW. I'm a proud member of the UAW. This referendum is in line with our Constitution, Article 50, Section 8, where to authorize our union to call or join a general strike that's already in progress, you have to have a referendum, and the people will vote whether the UAW would support that strike. Now, actually conducting a referendum, there's nothing illegal about doing that. You can't arrest Sean Fain for conducting a referendum on anything, let alone on a general strike. Just because the referendum has been called does not mean there will be a general strike, but that is a threat. Now, if all the unions that we have left in this country, if they started these referendums, do you support authorizing a general strike? Our executive committee, our international executive board, to call or join a general strike, it would be something that was very inexpensive, very low risk, but it would have a tremendous impact on the regime. They would be frightened. And just as Hitler was frightened, he was really frightened by the Bremen call for the Bremen workers' call for a general strike, because there was not even one Nazi party office in Bremen. Every time there was they set up a Nazi party. Somehow it would just catch on fire. I don't know how that happened. But then they call the fire department. Hey, we had a fire over at the Nazi party headquarters. Oh, that's terrible. Okay, who's dealing? And the fire department would not respond. It was a pro-union, anti-Nazi city, and he had to crush it. So, and people, we've seen things recently in our recent history, like in Korea, South Korea, the president of South Korea, Yoon Suk Yeol, his name, he decided to take martial law in effect in South Korea. And if you would watch the NBC News or anything, well, what they did is they say, you can't do that. It's not legal, and we're going to impeach you. So they impeached him in December of 24, and they removed him from office in April of 2025. Now, the story of how this happened has not been told. But the story, the fact is that the Korean trade union movement called for a general strike. And the people in South Korea know what fascism is. They know what tyranny is. Because in 1981, right after Ronald Reagan was elected and installed in office, the leader at that time, Chen Du-wan, who was the president there, he was an autocrat. He called out the paratroopers in South Korea to confront a revolt in what's called Gwangju City or Gwangju. And for 8 weeks, they patrolled the city and killed almost 8,000 people, almost 1,000 people a week. They had very restrictive curfews and so forth. So the people of South Korea know what a military dictatorship is. They know what fascism is. And so the workers in South Korea on strike, general strike, you betcha. And that's the true story of what happened to Yoon Suk Yeol. I pronounced his name wrong, but you'll get the idea of what I'm talking about. But the thing is, in this country, we have to admit that many union workers that carry their union card and participate in their union and are proud members, they voted for Trump. Many of them are regretful of this. Many of them wish they hadn't done that. But if you give them a referendum, you give those people who regret that they voted for Trump and the horrible things that he's doing, you give them an opportunity to sort of redeem themselves by voting for authorizing a general strike. That's why I want to get across to the people that we have to know what the waters are for a general strike. And if we conduct these referendums and we get like a 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 margin in favor of calling a general strike, we'll know that the people, they were union members who voted for Trump, but they don't like him now. And this is why this call for a referendum within the union movement, even though it's small, it can grow, it can catch fire, and it can cascade.
And some of the unions in Germany believed that they could work with Hitler, that Hitler would allow them to operate. And what happened after Hitler came to power as far as the unions in Germany?
Well, he obviously attacked them, undermined them, and was successful in many ways, but unsuccessful in Bremen. They couldn't even get a Nazi party headquarters in the city of Bremen. They were all burned down mysteriously. So
why is it that the unions here are silent? Because Brandon Johnson, the mayor of Chicago, third largest city in the United States, supported the call for a general strike. Sarah Nelson, the president of the airline flight attendants, 60,000 flight attendants, has called for a general strike. And yet there's been complete silence by the rest of the trade union leadership about these calls for a general strike against like military occupations of Chicago and other cities. Why is that?
Well, not only that, but if put on your union thinking cap right now, and if someone told you that the federal government just said they're going to cancel all the contracts with the American Federation of Government Employees or other unions that represent federal employees. That should piss you off to know. I mean, no matter what you think of the other things he's doing. I went to a union meeting and I talked to a Trumpster, and I said, well, what do you like about Trump? Well, he's stopping the fentanyl from coming. I said, that's ridiculous. Those boats are 2,500 miles away. You'd have to refuel them 20 times just to get close to the United States. So anyhow, my point being is that the people who are suffering, and you will have to admit that Trump's policies and his firings of workers, his crushing of the Medicaid is going to affect many of the people that voted for him. So there is going to be a turn in the support for fascism and Trumpism. And when that happens, we want the unions to be in the lead, in the front, because if the unions vote and honor and participate in a general strike, I don't care if it's just in one city or two American cities or whatever, that's going to embolden other workers who are not union members to also join the general strike. So that's
the other issue is that Trump has said that he's not going to follow the Constitution. The Supreme Court has ruled that anything he does, he declares an official act, he can get away with. He can't be criminally prosecuted. He has said that told a Christian fundamentalist group when he was running that would be the last election. If he got elected, they wouldn't have to vote anymore. And the use of Insurrection Act to institute martial law, say if we invade Venezuela, that he declares there's a war with Venezuela and institutes the martial law. Do you think there's a threat of martial law and a dictatorship in the United States?
Absolutely. I thought it since the 90s, the 1990s. So it's no shock. It's no, I don't have to process or reprocess my thoughts about this country because I've expected it much earlier than this. But the fact that they have done it so completely, and they have extended themselves, the amount of criminal and international law violations that this regime is doing tells me that they don't plan on leaving. They don't plan on giving up power ever. So what do you have to do? Well, you may have to do what they did to Hitler, which is defeat him militarily and crush him. But I think that in the United States, we can crush him with the general strike, just like we did, just like the Korean workers did in this year when what's his name, Yoon Suk Yeol declared himself leader of a military coup. Now, as far as the union leaders, I like my union leader. I know him personally. I've worked with him. He was my servicing rep when I was a union officer. I like Shawn Fain, but I think he's frightened. I think he's frightened from two things. He's frightened from what the government could do to him, what Trump can do to him. He's also frightened of his own members that are loyal cult members of the Trump cult. And that leads me to believe that other union leaders, if Shawn Fain is frightened, then I think a lot of the other union leaders are frightened as well. And I'm really surprised to see Sean O'Brien of the Teamsters Union licking the boots of Donald Trump and his regime. So the answer is they're scared. They're scared. Our leaders are scared. But if we had a referendum and they knew, for example, if we knew that the anti-Trump membership of the UAW was much, much bigger than the pro-Trump, I think that would give courage to Shawn Fain. We just have to get that courage going. I don't know when that development will happen, but I hope it's soon. And we're going to try and get a petition going, calling for a general strike, authorizing our UAW leaders to call a general strike, or to join one that's already in progress. And if the other unions follow suit, and if the other unions have just a referendum, a very inexpensive form of resistance, but it will have a tremendous effect on tamping down the boldness of the Trump regime and their allies. So I see Frank's here.
So maybe you can introduce Frank, who also is another UAW retiree of
Right,
Local 909 in Detroit, General
right.
Motors Local, and has been active in the UAW and building international solidarity. And we've been talking, Frank, about uh, the idea of a general strike and a campaign for a referendum in the UAW to raise the issue of a general strike, and whether or not that's necessary and whether or not that would take the struggle forward of uniting the UAW and other unions to take action against this government. First of all, do you think that we have a threat of fascism in the United States, Frank?
Steve, you and I talked a little bit about this and about my own family experience. And I think people, grapple with the question of, what is fascism? Is fascist? Is it correct to describe what's going on in the United States as fascism? And the way I can shed some light on that is from my own family experience. And that's a little bit of a story. So I'm going to go back to where my family came from. My family came from Germany. My family, my father and my mother fled Germany when Adolf Hitler came to power in 1933. My dad saw the writing on the wall. He was the son of an industrialist. He was not, in any way on the left or anything like that. But he had enough insight to know that things were going to get pretty dangerous and to explain, even though his family had generations before converted from Judaism to Lutheranism, it didn't matter because all the families in Germany had to register with local authorities in regards to their family lineage. So my family's lineage traced back in some other previous generation to Judaism, and therefore they would be in danger of being picked up by the German police, the Gestapo. So they left. They left Germany, and they cautioned other family members to do the same because of the dangers they saw coming down the pike. And there were other family members that paid it no mind and disregarded that advice. And one of those particular family members was on my mother's side, her grandmother, who lived in Berlin. And the story about her, and the reason I want to bring her up, and if I may make a little intermission here, is that there was an incredible parallel between what I'm going to describe about my grandmother to what transpired in the city of Chicago. What was it, 3, maybe 4 weeks ago? This horrific scene with, in the middle of the night, I think it was around 3 in the morning, where these Black Hawk helicopters hovered over this large apartment building. And these agents came down the ropes and came down on the rooftops of the buildings and then went through the buildings and crashed the door of every apartment. And there's a multi-floor units. And not only did they secure and drag the people out, and I know that there were descriptions in the media about people half naked and they were zip tied and all that horrifics of what transpired. And also you saw some images of what they left in terms of what was in the apartments, and it was totally disheveled, destroyed, everything was scattered. And it reminded me back to my experience of my mother's mother. The Gestapo came to her building where she lived, to her floor, and did exactly the same, dragged her out of her unit and destroyed everything in her apartment. And the way we learned about this, and this was transmitted to me, was that the concierge of that building had gone up to see what remained of the apartment and found only one plate intact and took it. And I can tell you This is the plate that came out of that apartment after the Nazis went in and destroyed it and grabbed her and took her out. And the parallel to witness what was done in Chicago, never mind that the White House made this glorified drama video of it, was chilling. And it just told me that that wasn't by coincidence. They're drawing from a playbook. And that playbook goes back to Nazi Germany. And we have to understand that they have a playbook and they're following a script. And that was one incident that just was too eerily the same as what my own family experienced. So I want to put that in the context so that people, when they talk about what's going on in the U.S., have some parallels and understanding that this is quite like what the Nazis and what Hitler did in Germany in the lead up to the concentration camps and the extermination camps and so on. So I know that was a long verbiage, but it's just
important.
Worth telling.
I think it was very important. And of course, the mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, former teacher in the Chicago Teachers Union, has called for a general strike nationally. And what's interesting is, I mean, he's an important figure, third largest city in the United States, and yet there's been silence about it. In other words, the mayor of the third largest city says we need a general strike in this country to stop these fascist raids that are going on today as we speak in Chicago, the raids in Los Angeles. And yet in the unions, there's silence, except for Sarah Nelson, the American flight attendants who call for a general strike. It's as if we close our eyes, this is going to disappear or go away. I mean, it seems like a dire situation for working people, whether you're brown, black, whatever. This is a threat to your existence in this country. And that's why I think George's call for UAW locals and members to support a referendum could be a very important initiative to say this is the kind of answer working people unions need to have in this country against a growing fascist attack on the working class.
Yes.
If I may, and maybe you and George might have already spoken about this, but during if I recall, during the stand-up strike that the UAW initiated and engaged with the Big Three back in 2023, there was a moment of great showings of solidarity at UAW Local 551's Union Hall. And on the stage, among others, including Sarah Nelson, was none other than Brandon Johnson, the mayor of the city of Chicago. And he was there, as was Sarah Nelson, to express solidarity with the UAW. And Sean Fain was on stage and promoting the solidarity for the what turned out to be about a 40-day strike. And it seemed to me that there's an element of reciprocity that the UAW can express to, this is a black mayor of the city of Chicago. I mean, standing up to these fascists in the White House. And this is a moment to show solidarity and to not let Brandon Johnson, be in any way isolated with his call for a general strike. We need to take him seriously, and we need to, bond together with him and other mayors and other forces, and unions, to say, that we're prepared to do this, and we will solicit support from our respective memberships, which is what I think George was talking about with this referendum.
And one of the big issues is, of course, the trade war, which Sean Fain and the other Fain,
John O'Brien.
Sean O'Brien is supporting, that they would support a trade war. Now, as we all know, one of the things that led to World War II was the trade war, the trade wars that led to a depression. And what has happened in the United States is that is causing enormous economic crisis for small business people, for workers in Canada, workers in Mexico, workers around the world. And even though Sean Fain supported this, there are factories in the United States that import products from other countries. that are being affected by this trade war. Why would these officials support a trade war which is going to impact their own members and harm their own members? Do they think that American auto workers can survive by shutting off the products of other countries? I mean, is this how we're going to defend American working people?
Well, I would say that, as I said earlier, our union leadership, and I don't care what union you're in, um, is torn between two devils. One devil is Trump and his regime, which can do things from the outside. The other devil is the cult members of uh, the Trump mythology that believe that anything Trump says we got to do. So our union leaders have an outside enemy who's at their throat and an inside enemy who's rumbling in their belly. So they have to deal with that. That the idea of a trade war came from the NAFTA days. And the NAFTA days, they were going to export our jobs. And they even give tax incentives for exporting capital to other nations, low wage or exotic wage nations. In fact, no matter what the trade policy is or the tariff policy, there are still tax incentives for you to take your industry to another place. Now, some places the tax incentive is greater than others, but the point I'm trying to make is if for a union leader to say, oh, I support the tariffs now after what we experienced with NAFTA, but NAFTA took jobs outside of America, let's say Canada and Mexico or wherever, and then they had a trade agreement, a free trade agreement. And now it's since the 90s when the NAFTA thing came through, it's been almost 30 years. So now we're in a different situation. And for Sean Fain to say that, oh yeah, we fought, we should have had tariffs back in the 1990s, and now we're going to have them. And when I say tariffs, the capitalists or the industrialists, the management, they shaking their boots. They're shaking their boots when I say, oh, we're going to support the tariffs. And what's happened is that these union jobs or these union leaders have been threatened that if you don't cave in on this, we're going to ship your jobs out and you won't have any union members in Malaysia or wherever we're going to take these jobs. And so they decide, okay, well, we should have had tariffs in 1990, but do we have to have them in 2025? It's like saying, hey, we invaded Canada back in 1812 and we didn't win, but maybe we should try again. I think we could beat Canada this time. Why is a good idea back in 1812 a good idea in 2025? It doesn't make any sense. And so Sean Fain has taken the wrong position on tariffs. Now, let me tell you, Sean Fain was my servicing rep. I like him. I respect him. And I know he's a man of integrity, but he is frightened. He is frightened, and he's listening to people who are more frightened than he is. So I'm not sure that this detente with Trump from the UAW or other unions is going to last. As you said, Steve, the policies of the Trump regime are going to hurt their own cult members. They're going to hurt their own voters. So the support for Trump is going to snap if it hasn't snapped already. So we've got to think about what's going to push it over the edge. And I think just calling a referendum on authorizing or supporting or joining a general strike will scare them. Like it scared Hitler. It didn't take him but a few days to say, I'm going to invade my own city and kill my own citizens in Bremen, Germany in 1939 in August. And he couldn't invade Poland until September when he was sure that no other German city was going to rise up against him. So just calling for a general strike, just calling for a referendum and conducting a referendum is going to frighten the fascists to no end.
And of course, most American workers are unaware that in this country there have been general strikes. There were general strikes. In fact, the building of the UAW came about as a result of a mass worker upsurge in the United States, of mass strikes, occupations of factories. I mean, it was a working class rebellion against Ford, against General Motors, against these what were union busting companies that did not even want to accept the union until there was mass upsurge of workers.
Let me ask you this: the did the if Sean Fain and the IEB said they support the tariff policy, they can get away with that by saying, well, it affects my members, so I have a right. It's a political issue. The tariff's a political issue, but it affects my members. Therefore, I have a right to take a position on it. And I think I like the tariffs. But what about a place called Gaza? A place where thousands, hundreds of thousands of people are being starved or murdered with atrocities. It's a genocidal attack, and it's still going on. But the UAW IEB said, we support a ceasefire in Gaza. How many members do we have in Gaza? Let me think. I don't think we have any UAW members in Gaza. We may have Arab Americans in our union who support the Palestinian people and their cause, but we don't have members in Gaza. Gaza is not going to affect our members, except maybe if they have relatives in that area of the Middle East or nearby. So my point is, if they can make a call for a ceasefire in Gaza, they can make a referendum calling for a general strike, and we can do it right now. And it should be done. Because what we've got to do is we've got to count the heads. We've got to take a poll, so to speak. How many Trumpsters are in these unions? Who still believes in the cult? Who is actually pro-fascist? Because you have to understand, Hitler's party had thousands of pro-fascist union workers. The unions that he didn't crush, but they were workers. And they were grateful because they were unemployed before, but now they got jobs building products for the war industry, the war machine that he planned to use. But now we're going in the opposite direction. Our Hitler, our orange Hitler, is driving us into a recession, into losing jobs. He's firing people left and right. He's crushing the federal employees. And any good union member would be pissed off to no end about this. Why? Sean Fain even had to mention it. He did a broadcast on YouTube and Facebook on the 8th of November, and he mentioned that Trump is not recognizing the contracts of the federal employees. He's disrespecting and attacking the union's workers for federal employees. He mentioned it, but he didn't say it's cause for a general strike. But back in the days of Patco, they not only talked about a general, it was talked about, it wasn't acted on. But every worker on the shop floor where I was, we should shut down the whole fucking country. The workers were for Patco. It's time. When they saw Stephen Waller, the head of Patco, in chains and leg irons, being frog marched, perp walked on TV, every union member who had, it was horrible. We had to have an answer. You can't arrest union leaders for calling a strike. You cannot. And we have to make that fact known by using a strike vote or the referendum to let them know we will go on strike if we are call it and join it, or if it's officially called and we will join it. So my point is, just calling for a general strike or just deciding to go on general strike and having this referendum, it will divide us between the workers who support Trump and the workers who oppose Trump. And I say this because in Brazil, they had a president named Bolsonaro who tried to seize power in imitation of Trump's January 6th, 2021 attempt to seize power. And this president, or this former president, is now going to prison for calling that insurrection in his democratic institutions. And the workers that I met when I was in Brazil were strongly divided. I would say maybe up to a third or a half supported not just Bolsonaro, but other candidates like Bolsonaro when I was there. And the other half supported Lula, Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva, the president who now sits in Brazil. So we are facing the same reality that I think the Brazilian workers are facing. Half of our members are going to be pro-fascist and half of them may be going to be anti-fascist. But once we get that number, when we know, let's say we have this referendum and 2/3 are anti-fascist and only 1/3 are pro-fascist, that's going to let our union leaders have a little bit of pressure drop from within their ranks. Now, what Trump's going to do, I don't know, but I haven't seen him make any smart moves, and I assume that he'll make some stupid moves when it comes to a union rebellion in this country.
And of course, the shutdown of the airlines, the FAA privatization, it's creating a catastrophic situation for the working class in this country, people who use the airlines and the airline workers. Yet, even though Sarah Nelson called for a general strike, she's been on TV today many times being interviewed, no mention of a general strike. And they're afraid that if they directly confront Trump with the call for a general strike, they may go to jail. He may jail them if they call for a general strike. But actually, that's the kind of action that can defeat Trump. A shutdown of the airline industry, closing all the airlines and urging workers throughout the country to close everything down is a way to confront fascist governments, as you have been saying. That was the lesson of the Greek workers. That was the lesson of the workers in Korea who stopped the military coup. It's by direct action of the working class. And I think that the threat of martial law, the threat of a military dictatorship, has to be answered by direct action of the entire working class. Workers have the power. They've shown in history that they have the power. But obviously, it takes a political organized campaign to say we need this kind of action to challenge these fascists, this attempt to destroy our democratic rights, our worker rights, and our human rights.
In our Constitution, it's when it speaks of the general strike, it says that we are allowed to call a general strike if it affects the social and economic interests of our members. And of course, this does affect the economic and social interests of our members in the UAW and of all workers. But one thing that I heard you say, Steve, earlier, before we got onto this program, is you said, the universities are caving in, the law firms are caving in, the networks are caving in, but they haven't defeated the workers. And that's correct. That is correct so far. But I would remind you, there's an old saying, you lose every battle you don't fight. So if the union movement in this country does not fight, it has lost a battle, and they have defeated themselves. But at the same time, I'll quote another guy who's definitely not a union guy, but his name was Napoleon Bonaparte. And he said, never interfere with the enemy when he is in the process of destroying himself. And that's what we see with Donald Trump. He is destroying himself.
It's a wrecking operation. Now, one of the things that's happening is the need for international unity. And Sean Fain did say when he was running, we have to build international solidarity with our brothers and sister auto workers in Mexico and Canada and around the world. And Frank, you're going to be going to India, hopefully if the airlines are working and you can get a passport, to an international conference of auto workers in India to build international solidarity. It seems instead of auto workers being pitted against each other, they need to unify with each other against the billionaire union busters who run these companies, who would like to destroy the unions. So maybe you can talk about why internationalism is really an answer for the American working class, not fighting the Chinese, not fighting the Mexicans and fighting the Canadians, but unifying workers around the world.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that there's two conversations, I think, and I want to sort of separate the two. One is the question of tariffs, and the other one has to do with renegotiating what was once NAFTA and was USMCA, and these trade agreements that are being, attacked for having undermined U.S. workers and so on. But those are two conversations. And in regards to the first, with regard to the support of tariffs, I think it's important for especially UAW members who maybe weren't UAW members when George and I were. We were at one time the members of a real international union, when we had the whole Canadian auto workers who were part of the UAW. And we were a pretty strong union, and the Canadian wing of the UAW was quite militant. In fact, they were very vocal back in the early 80s, fighting concessions. They were in the lead, and we were stronger for it. And that we had cross borders, we were members of the same union. And as George and I can say, by 1985, that fell apart, and we became separate unions. And then if you go fast forward now to the situation with tariffs, the relationship between Unifor, which is the union that represents auto workers in Canada, and the UAW, is extremely brittle. And what's happening is that Canadian auto workers, our brothers and sisters, are losing their jobs. And we're ignoring that as we tout, oh, we're creating jobs in the US. And what we're also ignoring is that Stellantis workers in Germany are losing jobs in droves as there's some resurrection of Stellantis jobs in the US. And it's a trap. It's a trap because what it does, it disengages the unions from each other, and they have us isolated from each other and unable to cooperate with each other because of these tensions. And I think that going to the Auto Workers Conference in India, where the message is going to be, we need a united working class, we need a united auto workers movement, not only to take on these divisive engagements with tariffs and so on, but also to take on larger global problems that we're all faced with regard to the crisis of the climate. We have COP30, the reconvening of the International Climate Conference, and we as auto workers need to weigh in going forward that we need a united working class that makes a just transition away from ICE vehicles and to EVs, with all the problems that are associated with that. So that's on the tariff side. On the trade side, if what is our leverage? We're supposedly negotiating with the Trump administration. What's our leverage? Our leverage with regard to negotiating with the companies is we can walk out of the plants and shut them down. But what is our leverage in negotiating for a new trade agreement that's going to be any different or any better than the USMCA? The only leverage I see is the possibility of calling for a general strike. If we don't get the terms that support workers in the US, that support workers in Canada, that support workers in Mexico, we're shutting it down. And I think there would be a lot of unity in the working class in the US behind that kind of shutdown that says we want justice across the borders that doesn't undermine the jobs in Mexico, Canada, or the US. And that's the only leverage that I see going forward into these negotiations they're going to conclude in 2026.
And of course, the billionaires who are growing in the United States, while workers are becoming paupers and poor, they control both parties, the Democrats and Republicans. And I think that the crisis, the political vacuum that exists in this country is the working class don't have their own political party. There is no Labor Party. There's no Workers' Party. I mean, I think many workers who supported Bernie Sanders wanted a political alternative. And yet you see that this crisis of capitalism, really, which is driving uh, the trade war, which is driving the climate decline because of the need for profits. Drill, baby, drill for more profits is actually destroying the world, destroying the working class in this country, destroying working people all over the world. And I think that that is an important aspect of this political crisis, because one of the things that uh, Sean O'Brien said is, well, we don't support the Democrats and Republicans, but then he ends up supporting Donald Trump. And the unions are in a political quandary because both parties represent capital. None of the parties say we should have single payer. We should get rid of the insurance companies and have health care for all, as they do in Canada. You would think that they would say, the unions, we need a single payer plan for all workers in this country to get rid of the insurance companies, the drug companies, and the hospitals controlling our health care. And yet, in Congress right now, today, they're talking about we should just give money to persons individually and they can buy their insurance. As if that's going to solve the problem. Give you $2,000 and you can go out and buy your health care for staying a day or two in a hospital. It can be $20,000 or $30,000. It's so crazy. The capitalist control of our healthcare system, it's driving people into bankruptcy, and it's forcing millions of people off of healthcare as we speak today, because of the Band-Aid that Obamacare was. They're getting rid of the Band-Aids, and people are losing the health care that they have. And as they privatize Medicare with Medicare Advantage, it seems that these contradictions in healthcare, in the environment, in climate, all these things are coming to a head, not just in this country, but globally, and require that the working class have its voice, have really control of our society, so that we're not driven to war, we're not driven to mass unemployment, which is, it seems, what we're facing.
Great.
I would like to point out that, Sean Fain, as president of our UAW, had a town hall meeting or a podcast on the 8th of November this month. And he mentioned how the federal government workers were being fired. Their contract just, pardon my French, they just shit canned the contracts. They no longer recognize the union. And yet, probably a year ago or a year and a half ago, Sean Fain talked about a coincident expiration date of May 1st, 2028. Excuse me, I'm an old guy. And the point of having a coincident expiration date for all unions gives enormous power to the working class. I've seen this in Brazil. Now, I talked earlier about how the Brazilian workers are divided, pro fascist and anti-fascist, or even socialist members of the unions in Brazil. But they have a coincident expiration date or month, the month of October, which is their May, as the seasons are opposite ours. So in October, all these contracts come together in 1 month, the month of October. And even though the pro-fascist Força Sindical hates the Central Unity of Workers, the CUT, Trabalhadores is workers, they hate each other. When it comes to contract time in October, oh, my brother, oh, we're going to get it. Why? Because there's money involved. That's why they want a good contract. So even though the unions in Brazil are split, pro-Bolsonaro and pro-Lula, in October, when it's contract time, when their contracts expire all in the same month, they join forces and fight for a good contract. Now, this is the kind of thing that I think is going to evolve here in the States, unless certain bad things happen. Now, if we get to the point that the two sides, the pro-Trump and anti-Trump forces, become so dangerous and violent that they start harming or killing people, which they already have in terms of ICE. But when we get to the point that one unit or military unit of one side has a firefight with the other military unit of the other side, just imagine if a Marine brigade was in a battle against an Army battalion or something, then we are in a civil war. That can happen. That is going to be the only way they can, I believe, that they can impose fascism universally through the United States. So when we see that happen, just like we saw at Fort Sumter, one side, the pro-slavery side and the anti-slavery side, it boiled up into the bombardment of Fort Sumter. It was a firefight between two sides. Now, no one was killed at Fort Sumter, but there was a lot of damage and a lot of hard feelings. So when that happens, then it's a whole new ballgame. It's a military question. And I think that we have a good chance of winning that battle too, because I think our military forces would fight to defend the Constitution and not the dictatorship of Trump or anyone like him. So, and when that because of this situation that we have, Sean Fain calling for a coincident expiration date in May 1st of 2028. Why is he not saying anything like that now? I mean, why? He could have used this he could advertise his campaign to get this done. I'm telling you, the man's afraid, or his advisors are afraid. And I don't blame him, because I've seen Stephen Waller, head of the Patco union, frog march to prison because Ronald Reagan fired all his workers. And it was it's something that I think it made an impression on all the union leaders, and still does, that they think that Trump might do the same thing. But I don't think so. I think that Trump is in the process of destroying himself. So, but
unlike Hitler, Hitler was very organized. He was building up Germany. Trump is actually destroying the United States, and he's attacking everyone at the same time. He's attacking veterans. He's attacking students. He's attacking healthcare workers. He's attacking education workers. He's attacking, all kinds of workers throughout this country. And he's attacking blacks. He's attacking browns. Many of the black and brown people who voted for Trump are themselves being rounded up by these fascist ICE agents. So in Florida, Venezuelans are being attacked. Cubans are being attacked. So the very people that supported Trump and supported the fascist ideology themselves are becoming victims of this fascist gangster and his cronies in the White House. So I agree with you, George, that actually the conditions for uniting the entire working class in this country are growing against the attacks that take place, and the unions.
If I may, so I do want to point out that Sean Fain really was the one to champion May Day in the course of leading the stand-up strikes, which I thought was really a break from the union edifice, in pointing out that Labor Day is not so important to us. It's May Day that's important to us. And that's why he wanted to, as you were saying, George, coincidence all the contracts on April 30th of 2028 in preparation for what may be a general strike. A lot of us look at that and say, that's really pretty far down the road. We need to begin, if anything, we need to begin to build our strategically for that eventuality. But we ought to be talking about a general strike in the near term. And we know that the labor movement has been generally moribund. We're way below 10% of the workforce in the U.S., and it requires some building and organizing. And, I had put forward that we have May Day 2026, which, by the way, is the 140th anniversary of the historic general strike in Chicago in the U.S. It's a domestic event that should be resurrected, and it was already being resurrected last year. There were 1,000 locations in the U.S. that were commemorating May Day, that we ought to expand on that. And it's falling on a Friday this year, 2026. And we all tell everybody, take a 3-day weekend. Don't go to work. And I think that if we can begin to build, like you said, with a referendum, if we can build mass support for the idea that, Sean Fain has talked about the billionaire class, and our strikes were for the entire working class. That's a way of beginning to coalesce it. Maybe it needs to happen before May 2026, but it certainly should happen by May 2026. And we should see that as a test of our strength and ability, capacity to organize the working class into a general strike.
Okay, well, I want to thank both of you for this discussion about the political crisis, the rise of fascism, the threat of fascism, and the response of the working class, the general strike, and the lessons of the working class in Germany and the lessons of the working class today in the United States. These are critical issues that have to be confronted by the working class in the United States and internationally. How are we going to survive in this period? It's a question of life and death for the working class and the world, for that matter. So thanks for joining us on Work Week.
Awesome, Steve. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Hey, George.